Less than a week into his fifth term as president, Putin's government experienced a dramatic and secretive shakeup. Old guards fell, new stars rose, and the powers changed rapidly. On May 12th, former First Deputy Prime Minister Andrei Belousov unexpectedly replaced Sergei Shoigu as the new defense minister. Shoigu, previously celebrated by Russians, transitioned to Secretary of the Security Council, replacing Nikolai Patrushev. This role mainly involves advisory duties on Russian security, strategy, and culture, turning Shoigu's war leader status into a more sedentary role. Patrushev, the former secretary, was reassigned elsewhere. Going from the main driving force of war to tea time, although one can witness the course of war, they may also be forgotten by history. Shoigu must inevitably have mixed feelings. This demotion reflects the Kremlin's deep dissatisfaction with Shoigu's performance in the Russia-Ukraine war over the past 810 days. It is also a stark rejection of the previously praised victories of the Russian military. The war's downturn has shaken Russia's power structure, showing that even well-established figures like Shoigu can face sudden dismissal. Putin's quick replacement of Shoigu at the start of his new term has led to widespread speculation and discussion in global media. Many analysts believe that appointing economist Belousov as defense minister aims to sustain Russia's fortress economy, ensuring logistical support and prolonging the conflict. However, these views may overlook the deeper power dynamics at play. The reshuffle involves three key figures: Belousov, Shoigu, and Patrushev. It reflects complex power struggles and shifting political winds. Nikolai Patrushev briefly served as prime minister in 1999 and from 2008 to May 2024 worked behind the scenes as secretary of the Security Council. Although this role seems advisory, Patrushev wielded significant influence. Patrushev is one of the most mysterious figures in Russian politics. While the Secretary Council typically serves as a laid-back institution, Patrushev was given special tasks by the Kremlin. He managed sensitive operations such as intelligence, secret financial investments, overseas assets, and special forces, much like a trusted royal envoy in ancient times. As the successor to the Soviet Union, Russia inherited a vast and complex intelligence apparatus. The Kremlin has deep ties to this background, so agencies like the Foreign Intelligence Service, Federal Security Service, Ministry of Emergency Situations, and Ministry of Internal Affairs maintain a network of informants throughout the military and society. When Patrushev transitioned from prime minister to oversee these intelligence systems, Western military experts recognized him as a close ally of the president and Russia's second most powerful figure. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the notorious Wagner Group, rose to prominence under Patrushev's support. Patrushev and his office thus represent a covert extension of Kremlin power. In June 2023, Prigozhin led the Wagner Group in a mutiny against the Moscow government. On the surface, this was a conflict between Prigozhin and the military leadership, including Shoigu and Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. However, diving deeper, it was a power struggle between Patrushev's intelligence group and the official military. As Wagner's patron, Patrushev likely encouraged Prigozhin's rebellion to weaken Shoigu and Gerasimov, thereby expanding the intelligence system's power. Wagner's reputation for combat meant that if it could overpower the official military, Patrushev's intelligence network could gain greater control in military affairs. The mutiny ended with Prigozhin's sudden disappearance and subsequent mysterious death. Patrushev then managed the aftermath under the Defense Ministry's guise. Seemingly, Wagner was absorbed into the military, suggesting a military victory. In reality, Patrushev's intelligence system co-opted Wagner, achieving its goal of power expansion. This demonstrated Petrushin's strategic acumen in politics, likely the reason for Putin's long-term reliance on him. Having completed his mission, Patrushev no longer needed the facade of being the Security Council secretary, so it was logical to have Shoigu take his place. Patrushev, even after stepping down, can carry on his work elsewhere in service of the Kremlin. As Shoigu takes over, he might find a position with little actual power. Though Shoigu has been appointed as the secretary of the Russian Security Council, he hasn't been granted the corresponding authority. The power of this position depends largely on the individual's abilities. Patrushev, with his capabilities, wielded significant influence during his tenure. In contrast, Shoigu may find it challenging to match Patrushev's level of control. Despite Patrushev stepping down, much of the actual decision-making remains in his hands, leaving Shoigu with limited influence. This reshuffle essentially removes Shoigu from his familiar territory in the Defense Department and places him in an intelligence system where he has little experience and authority. This move is a classic setting of scores. During the first military parade of his fifth term, Putin successfully reframed the special military operation as a righteous war of the Russian people against the West and Nazism, significantly boosting national morale and diffusing domestic political tensions. With the Kremlin's political prestige reinforced and nationalistic sentiments at an all-time high, it was an opportune moment to address early strategic errors, internal disagreements, and the Wagner incident. However, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine means that the morale of the Russian military needs to remain stable. The Kremlin understands that any retaliation must be gradual, so they have chosen to temporarily safeguard the positions of key figures like Deputy Defense Minister and Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov, who is also the commander of the Ukrainian War Joint Forces. Instead, the focus shifted to Shoigu's role as defense minister. Shoigu, the top leader of the Russian Defense Ministry, holds a position of great influence and is celebrated by some online Russophiles as the war god comparable to Zhukov. However, due to his Tuvan or Mongolian background, he is politically dependent on the Kremlin and militarily reliant on Gerasimov within the Russian military. When sudden changes occur, Shoigu is destined to be the scapegoat. From the current personnel arrangements, it appears that Gerasimov will continue as the commander of the Ukrainian war zone. This indicates that the Russian government still has a degree of trust in his military leadership. Should Patrushev return to take charge of Ukrainian affairs, he may impose new specific demands on Gerasimov to adjust military operations. Finally, let's introduce the new Russian defense minister, Andriy Belousov. Like Shoigu, Belousov is an outsider in military affairs and represents the voice of Russia's current fortress economy and core interest groups. Graduating from the Moscow State University's economics department, he quickly climbed the career ladder. By 2008, at age 49, he was appointed director of the finances and economic department in the Russian Prime Minister's office and later Minister of Economic Development. At 54, he became an aide to Putin. Despite Russia being a global superpower in energy and resources, its economic progress has long stagnated. Facing these challenges, Belousov proposed several innovative measures, such as encouraging citizens to donate money instead of raising taxes, and confidently promising that by 2030 Russia will be among the world's top 4 economies. Following the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, as a main proponent of Russia's fortress economy, Belousov actively advocated for the development of the military-industrial complex, aiming to bolster domestic demand to counter Western sanctions. In the Kremlin's eyes, he has become the de facto chief logistician during wartime. His recent appointment as defense minister is seen as a move to streamline logistics support, ensure military production, and provide a solid economic foundation for the special military operation. Regardless of the policies Belousov implements as the new defense minister or the recent personnel changes within Russia's high ranks, these actions reflect Putin's strategic planning during wartime. The ultimate goal is to reinforce the Kremlin's ultimate authority, ensuring that all departments efficiently execute wartime tasks under unified leadership. Within the Russian government, there is a power struggle between the factions of Chemizov and Patrasov. Chemizov, who is close to Putin, controls Russia's largest state enterprise and the third largest arms exporter, Rostec. He also has significant influence in the government. Patrushev, as the secretary of the Russian Security Council, is seen as the second spy master after Putin. In the formation of the new government, the two factions seem to have reached a certain balance. It is rumored that the choice of Prime Minister Mushaistin was at the request of Xi Jinping, without which Putin would not be allowed to visit Beijing. If true, this is actually a strategy for Russia. The Russian leadership can meet some of China's demands in exchange for more economic aid to sustain the Ukraine war. It is worth noting that Patrashev might design a new position for himself to exercise power informally in order to avoid public scrutiny. On the surface, he seems to be stepping back, but in reality, he is playing a more sophisticated power game. By strategically yielding some positions, Patrashev might gain greater freedom to manipulate powerful departments from behind the scenes. The first deputy prime minister position is held by Mityrev from the Chemizov faction, while Patrushev's son Dmitry is appointed as the second deputy prime minister, with prospects of becoming prime minister by the end of the year and president next year. Patrushev might create a new informal position for himself to continue exercising significant influence. For the defense minister role, Chemizov and Patrushev agreed to appoint Belousov, who has a special mission to place major military funds under the control of the political bureau, preventing the misuse of the defense budget. China appears to want Russia to remain in conflict with the West, ultimately to control Russian assets and reduce Russia to a vassal state. Currently, Russia has to rely on Chinese aid, but is unwilling to be subordinate. Putin is seeking a compromise with the West to ease sanctions, softening his stance while continuing to use the Ukraine issue and nuclear weapons for leverage, such as recent tactical nuclear exercises by the Southern Military District and Navy. Russia aims to get the West to open some concessions. Looking ahead, the Russia-Ukrainian war is expected to peak between summer and autumn of 2024-2025. This period will see the height of Russia's military production, activation of stored weapons, and implementation of wartime mobilization, so Ukraine's toughest times may also be approaching. It is estimated that in the past 800 days of intense fighting, the Russian army has lost at least 8,000 tanks. However, through the import of related equipment and parts, the Russian army could complete the low-cost repair and upgrade of about 5,000 tanks in the next 500 days. Based on the inventory, production capacity, and consumption numbers of Russian armored vehicles, the Russian army should be able to sustain itself for about 500 days until the spring-summer of 2025-2026. That is, if the domestic political environment remains stable. This implies that Ukraine may face even greater strategic pressure in the summer and autumn of 2024. To survive this most difficult phase, Ukraine urgently needs sufficient external assistance and must maintain a resolute resistance. Only then can it possibly see the dawn of victory between 2025 and 2026. It cannot be denied that the military legacy left by the former Soviet Union is an important card that enables Russia to sustain the current war. On the one hand, Russia relies on the Soviet legacy of nuclear arsenals and its nuclear deterrence strategy to prevent Western intervention. On the other hand, the Russian military mainly depends on the military-industrial enterprises established during the Soviet era. By repairing and upgrading the Soviet legacy of weapon stocks and adhering to Soviet theories and methods of mechanized warfare, Russia has been able to maintain an advantage in manpower and firepower in the current conflict. In this unbalanced war, the Ukrainian armed forces still need to continue their resistance in the remaining time of 2024 in hopes of reversing the situation. However, with the approach of summer, a larger-scale war looms over Ukraine. Undoubtedly, this will be the most brutal and ferocious stage since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, with its consequences difficult to estimate. More young lives are likely to tragically perish. For civilians, the trauma brought by this war is even harder to bear. Georgia is in turmoil. The birthplace of Stalin has seen large-scale protests and demonstrations for over a week, with hundreds of thousands demanding to join the EU and NATO, refusing to become a Russian satellite state, and calling for the return of Georgian territory occupied by Russia. The international community is closely watching Putin's visit to China on May 15th. Historically, whenever these two leaders meet, it often signals major events about to unfold. The Russian military has begun large-scale attacks on Kharkiv and threatens to enter Odessa, opening a new front beyond the eastern and southern lines of Ukraine, indicating that a full-scale war may be imminent. It is widely believed that Russia needs China's support politically, economically, and possibly militarily at this stage. It remains to be seen if Putin will declare full-scale war on Ukraine. If he does, NATO is likely to join the direct conflict. Another significant event to watch is the inauguration of Taiwan's president-elect, Lai Ching-te, on May 20th, as the PLA may take action against Taiwan on this day. The CCP finds itself in a quandary regarding Putin's visit. From an ideological and geopolitical standpoint, China and Russia remain in need of mutual support to counter the Western alliance spearheaded by the United States. In public, Xi Jinping must also display unwavering support for Putin to showcase the strategic importance and reliance of Sino-Russian relations. However, the deleterious effects of the Russia-Ukraine war on China have become increasingly evident, with economic downturns and diplomatic setbacks making it arduous for China to shoulder Russia's burden. Consequently, Xi Jinping's support for Putin is likely to be circumscribed and prudent. While assistance to Russia may persist, its magnitude will be limited. Rather than an unequivocal and wholehearted endorsement, it is more likely to be a political gesture aimed at maintaining appearances. This strategy of skillfully balancing between both sides and deftly adjusting to the prevailing winds is expected to become the recurrence of the CCP's current policy towards Russia.